"You lied that day," the little girl said to the millionaire at the airport, "and then something horrible happens. Leave a comment telling me what you thought of this story with a rating from 0 to 10, and let me know what city you're watching from. I really want to know if you liked my story and get to know you better, so please subscribe to my channel to support my work. I'm counting on your help." The Cedar Rapids Airport was buzzing with the typical energy of a Tuesday morning when David Thompson adjusted his Italian silk tie and checked the gold watch on his wrist. At 51, the entrepreneur had transformed a small market inherited from his father into a thriving supermarket chain that dominated the northern part of the state. His tight schedule didn't allow for delays, especially when it came to the important business conference in Chicago that could open up new expansion opportunities for his business. "Mr. Thompson, the flight to Chicago is now boarding at Gate 3, announced Martha, his personal secretary, checking the travel documents one last time. David nodded briefly, his thoughts already focused on the presentation he would give on distribution logistics in the rural Midwest. That's when he heard the sound of bare feet running across the cold airport floor. The little girl appeared like an apparition amidst the crowd of executives and travelers. Her brown hair was disheveled, her white t-shirt stained with dirt, and her small feet left damp marks on the polished floor. But it was her eyes that completely paralyzed David. Immense, tear-filled brown eyes that seemed to carry a pain far greater than any 4-year-old should ever know. "You lied that day," the girl shouted, her voice echoing through the busy terminal. The words came out between sobs that made her small chest rise and fall rapidly. "You promised you would never abandon me." David felt as if the world around him had stopped spinning. Passengers began to turn and watch the scene, concerned whispers spreading like invisible waves. Martha took a step forward, confused, but the entrepreneur stopped her with a wave of his hand. Something in the child's eyes struck him like a bolt of lightning. Awakening memories he had buried under years of meetings, spreadsheets, and business concerns. I don't understand," David murmured, slowly crouching down to be at the girl's level. His voice, normally firm and controlled during complex negotiations, trembled slightly. "Who are you, little one?" "I'm Bella," the girl replied, wiping her nose on the back of her dirty hand. "You held me in your arms when I was a baby. You said you would take care of me forever." The name hit David like a punch to the gut. Bella. Fragments of a distant memory began to form in his mind, like pieces of a puzzle he had kept in a forgotten drawer of his consciousness. A young, desperate employee, a small, fragile baby in his arms. A promise whispered in a moment of compassion that seemed to have happened in another lifetime. "Catherine," he whispered, more to himself than to the child. Bella's eyes lit up momentarily upon hearing her mother's name. "You remember Mommy. She said you were a good man, that you promised to take care of me when she had to go away." David felt his legs weaken. Now the memories came rushing back, bringing with them a devastating wave of guilt and regret. Catherine Smith, 19 years old, a member of the cleaning staff at his main supermarket. A rainy March night, 5 years ago, she had shown up at his store after hours, carrying a baby of just a few months, her eyes red from crying. "Please, Mr. Thompson," she had pleaded that distant night, "I have to leave town. Rick found me and said he'll hurt me if I don't go back to him. But I can't take Bella. She'll get hurt." He had held the baby that night. He had felt her small, warm weight against his chest, had whispered words of comfort as Catherine cried desperately. And yes, he had promised. He had promised to take care of the child until Catherine could come back for her. But the next day, pressured by company commitments and the feeling that he had gotten himself into a situation that was far too complicated, David had made the decision that now haunted him. He took Bella to St. Vincent's home, the local orphanage, convincing himself he was doing what was best for the child. Qualified professionals, proper care, a real chance of adoption by a stable family. I tried to do what was best for you, David said, his voice almost inaudible. The tears he hadn't shed in years began to well up in his eyes. I thought the orphanage would be... You lied, Bella shouted again, her small hand clenched into a fist. You said you would never leave me alone, and then you took me to that horrible place and never came back. The echo of the girl's words reverberated through the airport like accusations that cut deep into David's soul. Martha approached, clearly worried about the public scene unfolding. Mr. Thompson, your flight is about to depart, she whispered urgently. We need to handle this later, maybe call the authorities. No, David replied firmly, slowly standing up without taking his eyes off Bella. Cancel the flight. Cancel all my appointments for today. But, sir, the conference is important for... Martha, David interrupted, his voice filled with an emotion his secretary had never witnessed. There are things more important than business. Much more important. Bella watched the two adults talking, her eyes still full of tears, but now also with a cautious hope. She had run away from St. Vincent's home at dawn, walking the streets of Cedar Rapids, vaguely following the directions she had memorized during the month she planned this encounter. She knew the man who had betrayed her frequented the airport on Tuesdays. She had overheard two orphanage employees talking about it during a routine visit. Are you going to send me back there? Bella asked, her small voice filled with fear. David crouched down again, hesitantly extending a hand toward the girl. No, Bella, I'm not going to abandon you again. I promise. You've promised before, she replied, but she didn't flinch when he gently touched her shoulder. I know, and I broke my promise. But this time is different. David took a deep breath, feeling the weight of 5 years of repressed guilt finally finding an escape valve. This time, I won't run from my responsibility. As he spoke, David remembered how he had used work to escape almost every emotional problem in his life. After the messy separation from his ex-wife Rachel 3 years earlier, he had retreated even further into his business, building a corporate empire that masked his personal emptiness. But now, looking into those childish eyes full of pain caused by his own cowardice, he knew it was time to face the consequences of his choices. Where is your mommy now? He asked, gently wiping a tear from Bella's face. I don't know, the girl answered, shrugging. The director of the orphanage said she never came back for me because she didn't want me anymore. David closed his eyes for a moment, absorbing the cruelty of those words. Miriam Sanders, the director of St. Vincent's home, had always seemed like a cold woman during their few interactions. But to say that to a child who had already suffered abandonment was pure malice. That's not true, he said firmly. Your mother loves you very much, and we're going to find her. For the first time since she appeared running through the airport, Bella managed something that looked like a smile. You really promise? David held the girl's small, dirty hands in his, feeling the weight of the responsibility he had tried to avoid for 5 years. I promise, and this time, Bella, I will keep my word. But what neither of them knew was that Catherine Smith was closer than they imagined, working as a housekeeper on a farm just 40 miles from Cedar Rapids, dreaming every night of the day she could return for the daughter she had been forced to leave behind. David's apartment in downtown Cedar Rapids had never received such a small and silent visitor. Bella walked through the luxurious rooms as if stepping on sacred ground, her bare feet sinking into the soft carpet of the living room. Her eyes scanned the expensive furniture, the artwork on the walls, and the panoramic city view from the 10th floor windows. But her expression remained cautious, like that of a wounded animal, not yet fully trusting its savior. Are you hungry? David asked, noticing the girl's evident thinness. Her dirty, ill-fitting clothes told a story of neglect that made the entrepreneur's heart ache with guilt. Bella nodded shyly, but said nothing. During the drive from the airport, she had remained silent in the back seat of the car, just watching the familiar streets of Cedar Rapids pass by the window. David had tried to make small talk, but the girl's answers were monosyllabic, laden with a distrust taught by 5 years of abandonment. In the modern kitchen, David opened the refrigerator and was confronted with his reality. A single businessman who lived basically on food delivery and corporate events. There were some fruits, yogurt, sliced bread, and little else. Nothing suitable for a child who clearly needed proper nutrition. "How about we order a pizza?" he suggested, trying to sound casual. "Or maybe a burger. Can I have some bread?" Bella asked, pointing to the package on the counter. "At the orphanage, we only got stale bread for breakfast." The simplicity of the request hit David like a slap in the face. While he worried about sophisticated menus, the girl was grateful for simple bread. He prepared a few slices with butter and jam, watching as Bella ate slowly, savoring each piece as if it were a special meal. "Bella," David said, sitting at the kitchen table, "I need to ask you some questions about the orphanage, about how you got out of there." The girl's eyes filled with fear instantly. "Are you going to take me back?" "No, I'm not," he answered firmly, "but I need to understand what happened so we can handle this the right way." Bella took a deep breath before she began. "Yesterday morning, the director, Miriam, called some of us into her office. She said some of us were going to be transferred to an orphanage in Dubuque, far away. She said it was because the place was too crowded." David frowned. "Dubuque was over 100 miles from Cedar Rapids, and you were on the list?" "I was," Bella confirmed, her small hands trembling slightly. "But I heard Miriam talking on the phone with someone. She said she needed to get rid of some problematic children before the inspection next week." The entrepreneur felt a wave of indignation rise in his chest. Problematic how? Kids who ask too many questions, who complain about the bad food, who cry at night. Bella paused, playing with the breadcrumbs on her plate. "I always asked when my mommy was coming back. Miriam said I was a difficult girl." David clenched his fists under the table. With every word from Bella, his guilt mixed with a growing fury against the orphanage director. "And how did you manage to escape?" "I waited for everyone to fall asleep and climbed out the bathroom window. It doesn't have bars like the others." The girl spoke with the naturalness of someone who had planned every detail. "I walked all night until I got close to the airport." "You walked alone through the city all night?" David's voice carried both horror and admiration. Bella nodded. "I remembered you always took planes on Tuesday mornings. The ladies from the orphanage talked about it when they came to visit you for donations." David paused, processing the information. "What ladies?" "Sharon. She always came to pick up the donations from your supermarkets. She said you were her sister." David's heart skipped a beat. Sharon, his 46-year-old younger sister, had been responsible for coordinating the regular donations he made to several city institutions, including St. Vincent's Home. But she had never mentioned knowing Bella specifically, never commented on a girl who constantly asked about him. "Sharon never told me you asked for me," David muttered, more to himself. "She said you were too busy to care about kids from the orphanage." Bella replied innocently. "She said I should stop dreaming and accept that you had forgotten me." The girl's words struck David like daggers. Sharon knew. His own sister knew Bella was at the orphanage, knew the girl asked for him, and had deliberately chosen to say nothing. More than that, she had actively discouraged any hope the child might have. At that moment, the apartment's intercom buzzed. David answered and heard the familiar voice of Martha, his secretary. "Mr. Thompson, sorry to bother you, but the police are downstairs. They want to talk to you about a missing child." David looked at Bella, who had turned visibly pale. "Tell them to come up," he replied. "They're going to take me back," Bella whispered, tears forming in her eyes again. "No, they're not," David said, and crouching beside her chair, You're safe here with me. I'll explain everything to them. 5 minutes later, 2 police officers were in the apartment's living room. The older one, Sergeant Miller, had a serious but understanding expression. "Mr. Thompson, we received a report from St. Vincent's home about a missing minor. The director said the child might have sought you out. The girl is here," David answered directly, "and she is safe. Sir, we understand the situation, but the child needs to return to the institution. That's where she's officially registered." "And what if I say I intend to file for custody?" Sergeant Miller raised his eyebrows. "Are you related to the minor? Not by blood, but I have a moral responsibility. I was the one who took her to the orphanage 5 years ago when her mother had to be away temporarily." Bella, who had been hiding behind David, took a step forward. "I don't want to go back there," she said with a courage that surprised everyone present. "Aunt Miriam is mean to me." The younger officer knelt to be at the girl's level. "Why do you say that, little one?" "She said my mommy will never come back because she doesn't want me, and she was going to send me far away just because I asked too many questions." The 2 officers exchanged significant glances. Sergeant Miller took out a notepad. "Mr. Thompson, I'll need you to come to the station tomorrow to formalize your legal situation regarding the child. And I will initiate an investigation into the conditions at the orphanage. I'll be there at 8 in the morning," David replied. After the officers left, Bella clung to David's leg. "You're not going to give up on me again, are you?" David picked the girl up, feeling again that small, warm weight against his chest that he had experienced 5 years earlier. "Never again, Bella. This time I'll fight for you." That night, after giving Bella a bath and finding some makeshift clothes for her to sleep in, David stayed up in his office making calls, first to Robert Mendez, his family law attorney, then to a private investigator he had used for business matters. "I need you to find someone," David told the investigator. "Catherine Smith, 24 years old, worked for me 5 years ago. Might be working on farms in the region. Any specific leads?" David thought for a moment. "She was running from a man named Rick. I don't know his last name, but he might have a police record." While organizing the first steps to find Catherine, David made another decision. He picked up the phone and dialed his sister Sharon's number. "David, what a surprise you calling so late," she said. Her voice filled with a forced cheerfulness he could now identify. "Sharon, we need to talk. Tomorrow, at my place, 2 in the afternoon. About what? About Bella. About everything you never told me." The silence on the other end of the line was telling. When Sharon finally answered, her voice was different, defensive. "I don't know what you're talking about. We both know that's not true," David replied, his voice laced with a firmness he rarely used with his sister. "Tomorrow at 2, Sharon. We have a lot to talk about." After hanging up, he went to the guest room where Bella was sleeping. The girl was curled up in the clean sheets, finally looking peaceful for the first time since he found her at the airport, but even in her sleep. She was tightly holding a small drawing she had made during the afternoon, a figure of a man in a suit holding a little girl's hand. David sat in the chair beside the bed, watching the child's peaceful breathing. In less than 24 hours, his life had been turned completely upside down, but for the first time in 5 years, he felt he was doing something truly important. What he didn't know was that 100 miles away, Catherine Smith had just heard on the farm's radio a news report about a girl who had run away from an orphanage in Cedar Rapids. And her heart had stopped when she heard the name, Bella. The morning at the police station began with palpable tension in the air. David held Bella's hand tightly as they waited in the office of Detective Marcus Stone, a 58-year-old man known for his strictness in cases involving minors. Robert Mendez, David's lawyer, organized papers on the table, preparing for the legal battle he knew was coming. "Mr. Thompson," the detective said as he entered the room, "the minor's situation is quite irregular. We have a report here from the director of St. Vincent's home. stating that the child is problematic and that you may be influencing her against the institution. David felt Bella's small hand tremble in his. "Detective, with all due respect, I'd like you to hear the child's side of the story before making any decisions." The detective addressed Bella gently. "Little one, can you tell me why you ran away from the orphanage?" Bella looked at David, who nodded encouragingly. In a small but firm voice, she told him about the forced transfer, about Miriam Sanders' cruel words, and about how she had carefully planned her escape to find the man who had promised to take care of her. "And why did you specifically seek out Mr. Thompson?" the detective asked. "Because he held me when I was a baby and promised he would never abandon me," Bella answered simply. "My mommy said he was a man of his word." Detective Stone frowned, clearly touched by the child's sincerity. At that moment, his secretary entered the room with a worried expression. "Detective, there's a woman here who claims to be the child's mother, Catherine Smith." David's heart stopped. Bella let out a cry of joy and ran to the door before anyone could stop her. In the hallway, a thin 24-year-old woman was waiting for her, tears streaming down her face. Catherine was visibly older than 5 years ago, her skin weathered by the sun from farm work, her clothes simple but clean. "My baby," Catherine whispered, hugging Bella with an intensity that moved everyone present. "My little one, you've grown so much." David watched the scene with a mixture of relief and apprehension. Robert touched his arm discreetly, reminding him that the biological mother's presence drastically complicated his legal situation. "Ms. Smith," Detective Stone said, "you abandoned this child 5 years ago. Can you explain the circumstances?" Catherine looked up, still holding Bella against her chest. "I did not abandon my daughter," she said firmly. "I had to leave her temporarily because I was being threatened. Rick Esperanza said he would hurt her if I didn't go back to him. And why didn't you come back for her sooner? Because when I tried, 3 months later, the orphanage director told me Bella had been adopted by a family in another state. That I no longer had any rights to her because I had signed an abandonment paper." David stood up abruptly. "What paper?" "I took Bella to the orphanage, but there was never any abandonment paper." Catherine looked at him in surprise. "You took her to the orphanage, but you promised you would take care of her until I got back." The accusation in Bella's mother's eyes was like a knife to David's heart. I thought it would be better for her. I thought qualified professionals." "You lied to me too," Catherine said, her voice breaking. "You promised you would protect my daughter." The silence in the room was deafening. Bella looked confusedly between the two adults, not fully understanding the tension that had set in. It was Robert who broke the silence. "Detective, I believe we need to investigate this matter of the supposed abandonment paper. If the institution forged documents, that's a crime." At that moment, the door opened again, and Sharon Thompson entered the room unannounced. At 46, she maintained the family's natural elegance, but her face was tense and worried. "David, I came as soon as I heard you were here," she said, pretending not to notice Catherine and Bella's presence. "Perfect timing, Sharon," David replied coldly. "We have a lot to clear up." The detective, sensing the growing complexity of the situation, decided to take control. "Let's all move to a larger room. I need to hear each version separately." Over the next hour, the stories unfolded like pieces of a dark puzzle. Catherine revealed she had worked on distant farms, sending letters to the orphanage that were never answered. Miriam Sanders had lied about the adoption and about Bella's whereabouts. Sharon, when pressed, finally confessed the truth that would change everything. "I knew Bella was at the orphanage," she admitted, avoiding her brother's furious gaze. "And I knew Catherine was trying to get in touch. Miriam approached me 3 years ago, asking me to convince you both to give up on the girl." "Why?" David asked, his voice filled with disbelief. "Because Sharon hesitated, then took a deep breath. Because I was jealous. You always cared more about your employees, about strangers, than your own family. When Rachel left you, you didn't even care about my opinion. But as soon as an employee showed up with a baby, you got emotionally involved. Sharon's confession hit the room like a bomb. Catherine turned pale, David clenched his fists, and Bella hid behind her mother. So you deliberately sabotaged the reunion of a mother and her daughter out of jealousy? The detective asked, his voice heavy with disapproval. I didn't think it would come to this, Sharon muttered. Miriam said it was temporary, that she would soon find a suitable family for the girl. At that moment, Robert received an urgent call. After a few minutes of conversation, he hung up with a grim expression. Detective, my investigator just uncovered something disturbing. Rick Esperanza, the man who was threatening Catherine, has been working as the head of security at David's main supermarket for the past 2 years. The silence that followed was absolute. David felt the world spin around him. Impossible, he muttered. It's true, Robert said, consulting his notes. Rick was hired on the recommendation of Sharon herself, who said she knew him from previous jobs. All eyes turned to Sharon, who had gone completely white. I didn't know he was the same man who was threatening Catherine. How did you know Rick? The detective pressed. Sharon started to cry. Miriam introduced us. She said he needed a job and was trustworthy. I never imagined. Catherine stood up slowly, her voice trembling with restrained anger. You put the man who threatened me to work in your own brother's company. The man who forced me to flee the city. I didn't know, Sharon shouted. Miriam never said he was the same person. Robert motioned for everyone to calm down. Detective, this suggests a conspiracy. Miriam Sanders deliberately coordinated to keep Catherine away from Bella and even placed the abuser in a position of power over the family. Detective Stone nodded gravely. I'm issuing an arrest warrant for Miriam Sanders for document forgery and manipulation of a minor, and I want Rick Esperanza here for questioning today. While the legal arrangements were being made, Bella remained hugged to her mother, but her eyes kept searching for David. Despite all the confusion and the painful truths being revealed, she still felt a connection to the man who had held her as a baby. David, Catherine said, her voice softer now, I understand why you took Bella to the orphanage. You were trying to do what you thought was right. But I broke my promise, he replied, his eyes welling up. To you and to her. And now you have a chance to keep it, Catherine said, looking at her daughter. Bella told me you promised to help find us. She still believes in you. At that moment, the detective's phone rang. After a brief conversation, he hung up with a serious expression. Rick Esperanza has fled, he announced. When the officers arrived at the supermarket to arrest him, they discovered he had abandoned his post 2 hours ago, taking some company documents with him. David felt a chill run down his spine. What kind of documents? Financial records, employee lists, and... The detective paused, consulting his notes, personal information about the Thompson family, including addresses and routines. The implied threat in the detective's words made Catherine instinctively pull Bella closer. Sharon began to cry harder, finally understanding the magnitude of the danger she had created. What do we do now? David asked. Now, Detective Stone said, you are under police protection until we capture Rick and Miriam, and we start to dismantle this web of lies that almost destroyed a family. But as the adults discussed protection and legal procedures, Bella whispered something in her mother's ear that made Catherine turn pale. The girl had seen Rick the previous week, visiting the orphanage, and he had asked specifically about her. 3 months after the revelation at the police station, life in Cedar Rapids had completely transformed for everyone involved. The house David bought in the Maple Creek neighborhood was simple compared to his old luxury apartment, but it had something the entrepreneur had never valued before, a spacious yard where Bella could play freely, and enough rooms for Catherine to rebuild her life with her daughter. Miriam Sanders' trial had ended the previous week, with her conviction for document forgery, embezzlement, and child abuse. The investigations revealed a complex scheme where she diverted funds meant for the orphanage and manipulated adoption records to hide her wrongdoings. Dozens of families had been harmed by her crimes. Rick Esperanza, captured 2 weeks after his escape, faced multiple charges of threat, extortion, and criminal association. During his testimony, the most shocking truth of all was revealed. He had never been Catherine's abusive boyfriend. In reality, he had been hired by Alan Montague, a business competitor of David's, to destroy the Thompson family's reputation through a personal vendetta. The true story behind Bella's abandonment was even more painful than anyone had imagined. Catherine finally revealed, on a September afternoon, in the yard of the new house, the full truth she had carried alone for 5 years. Alan Montague is Bella's biological father, she confessed, as they watched the girl play with a set of dolls David had bought her. I worked as a cleaner in his office when I was 19. He promised me a permanent job, said he would take care of me. David felt a wave of nausea. Alan was known in the city for his questionable business dealings and his reputation for exploiting vulnerable employees. When I found out I was pregnant, he offered me money for an abortion, Catherine continued, her voice trembling. When I refused, he fired me and spread lies about me all over town. No one else would hire me. That's why you invented the story of the abusive boyfriend. David understood. Catherine nodded, tears streaming down her face. I was ashamed of the truth. Alan was married, respected. Who would believe a poor girl against him? So I made up Rick, said he was violent, and I had to run away from him. But how did the real Rick get involved in all this? Alan found out where I was working on the farms and sent Rick to threaten me for real. He said if I ever came back to Cedar Rapids or tried to find Bella, he would frame me for crimes and put me in jail. The complexity of Alan's revenge was finally revealed in all its cruelty. He had used Sharon, manipulated Miriam, hired Rick, and orchestrated 5 years of suffering for an innocent child, all to get back at David for winning contracts he coveted. That night, after Bella fell asleep in her new room decorated with bird drawings she had made herself, David and Catherine sat on the porch for a conversation they both knew was necessary. Catherine, David said, I want to officially adopt Bella. I want her to have my name and my legal protection, but only if you agree. Catherine looked at him in surprise. Why? You have no obligation. Yes, I do, he interrupted gently. I failed both of you 5 years ago. I let fear and convenience speak louder than my heart. Now I want to do things differently. And what if I say no? David took a deep breath. Then I'll respect your decision. But I will continue to help you in any way I can. Bella will always have a place in my life, regardless of legal papers. Catherine was silent for a long time, watching the stars that shone in the Cedar Rapids sky. You know she always knew, don't you? Knew what? That you weren't her father. Even as a baby she felt the difference. But she chose you as her family anyway. The words struck David like a lightning bolt. How do you know that? Because yesterday she asked me if she could call you Daddy. She said she didn't care where she came from, but she wanted to be with the one who really cared about her. David felt tears forming in his eyes. And what did you say? I told her she should ask you. At that moment, Bella's tiny voice echoed from the back door. David, can I talk to you? The girl approached the porch, holding a folded piece of paper. I drew this for you, she said, handing him the paper. David unfolded the drawing and saw a family of 3 holding hands in front of a house with a large yard. Above the characters, in careful childish letters, was written, My real family. Bella, David said, crouching to her level, would you like me to officially be your daddy? The The girl's eyes lit up with a joy he had never seen before. "Are you going to really promise this time? Promise you'll never abandon me?" "I promise," David answered, hugging the girl. "And this time, it's forever." 6 months later, in the March heat that heralded the end of summer in Iowa, Bella's adoption was finalized at the Cedar Rapids courthouse. The girl, now 5 years old and wearing a blue dress Catherine had sewn especially for the occasion, held David's hand as the judge read the documents that officially made her Bella Thompson Smith. Catherine, who had accepted David's offer to manage one of the supermarket chain stores, was beaming, seeing her daughter finally have the stable family she had always wanted. Sharon, who had spent months in therapy dealing with the guilt of her actions, was present at the hearing, trying to rebuild her relationship with her brother. "Bella," the judge said, smiling at the girl, "do you have anything you'd like to say?" The girl stood up in her chair and said in her clear voice, "I want to say thank you for letting me stay with my real family. And I want to tell all the children that sometimes adults make mistakes, but when they truly fix them, it's worth the wait." Bella's simple words moved everyone present. David picked her up, finally understanding that true wealth was not in the businesses he had built, but in the family ties he had almost lost to pride and fear. Alan Montague, convicted of multiple crimes including extortion and corruption, lost all his businesses and faced a long prison sentence. His attempt to destroy the Thompson family had resulted in his own destruction. Leaving the courthouse, Robert Mendez handed David an envelope. The investigator found this in Miriam's seized files. "I think you'll want to see it." Inside the envelope was a handwritten letter dated 3 years prior. It was from Catherine, addressed to David, begging for news of Bella and promising to come back for her as soon as she was financially stable. The letter had never been delivered. "She never gave up on you," Robert said, watching David read the letter with tears in his eyes. That afternoon, at the house in the Maple Creek neighborhood that had now officially become the family's home, Bella played in the yard with the other neighborhood children who had become her friends. Her laughter echoed through the air, a sound David never tired of hearing. Catherine approached him on the porch, carrying 2 glasses of mango juice made from the fruit of the tree Bella had insisted on planting in the yard. "You know what's most beautiful about all this? She said, watching her daughter play freely. "What?" Bella never lost the ability to trust. After everything she went through, after all the adults who failed her, she still believed you would keep your promise. David nodded, watching the girl who was now officially his daughter draw birds in the dirt with a stick. "She taught me that it's never too late to do the right thing. And that family isn't just about blood. It's about choosing to stay and fight for those we love." As the sun set over Cedar Rapids, painting the sky in golden hues that reflected in the windows of the simple but love-filled house, Bella ran to the porch and threw herself into David's arms. "Daddy," she said, using for the first time the word she had so longed to say, "you kept your promise, and I'll keep on keeping it forever, my little one," David replied, hugging the daughter he had found at the airport as a painful accusation and who now represented the complete redemption of his life. That night, for the first time in 5 years, Bella slept without nightmares, knowing she would wake up in the same place with the same people who loved her unconditionally. And David finally understood that true prosperity is not measured in profits or assets, but in the ability to keep the promises made to those who need them most. The family that fate had tried to tear apart was finally reunited, stronger for the obstacles they had overcome, and united by a true love that no conspiracy or revenge could ever destroy. If you liked this video, please subscribe to my channel. I promise to bring you videos every day that will make your life happier. Comment on what you thought of my story with a rating from 0 to 10, and thank you very much.